حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے، ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے، ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے۔
72 جنازے اٹھائے ہیں جس نے، نبی سے کہو اس کی غربت تو دیکھیں، نہیں کوئی جو اس کا لاشا اٹھائے، حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
پسر اور بھائی فدا کر چکا ہے، مگر شکر کا پھر بھی سجدہ کیا ہے، نہیں کوئی ایسے جو وعدہ نبھائے، حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
کٹے اس کے بازو جو بازو تھا اس کا، وہ 9 لاکھ سے پھر لڑا ہے اکیلا، نہیں پاس کوئی جو ہمت بڑھائے، حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
وہی جس کا ناقہ ہمارا نبی ہے، جو زہرا کا دل ہے، جو جان علی ہے، مسلمان کیوں اس کا غم نہ منائے، حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
گلا کند خنجر سے کٹنے لگا ہے، مگر دیکھو بھائی کے لب پر دعا ہے، خدا را بہن کو نظر یہ نہ آئے، حسین بے کفن ہے، خون میں نہائے،
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے، مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے،
جلانے کو آئے ہیں خیمے ستمگر، علی کو خبر دو نجف میں یہ جا کر، وہ جلدا کے زینب کی چادر بچائے، حسین بے کفن ہے خون میں نہائے
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے
نزین زمیں پر ہے مولا ہمارا ہے مقتل میں آئی ہوئی بی بی زہرا کرو خوب گریا کرو ہائے ہائے حسین بے کفن ہے خون میں نہائے
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے
ہے یہ ارسلانو کریم ایک صدمہ ہوا قتل پیاسا نواسا نبی کا جو عاشق ہے اس کا سبیلے لگائے حسین بے کفن ہے خون میں نہائے
ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے ہواؤں سے کہہ دو مدینے میں جائے مدینے میں جا کے نبی کو بتائے
حسین بے کفن ہے خون میں نہائے
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم وبہ نستعین والحمد للہ رب العالمین والعاقبۃ للمتقین والصلاة والسلام علی رسول اللہ وعلی آلہ ومن والاه والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الميامين المهديين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, Surah Al Imran, describes for us a group of people. And they're an elite, what I would say. These are the people in elite status. You know, as they say, as in the airlines, they have different status, right? Elite and platinum and diamond and whatever. So these are the ones who have gone past all their status levels, okay? In the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are those two kinds of people. There are those who have already fulfilled their duty, qada nahba. And most importantly, they've fulfilled their duty in terms of giving their life in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or there are those, the one that is waiting. He lies in wait, he waits or she waits for their opportunity to serve the deen. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. And they never change their ways. Meaning they don't swerve off the path that they've chosen. And ultimately, one of the circumstances of revelation here is Amir al-Mu'mineen has said that by Allah this has been revealed about us. That I am that one that is awaiting fulfill that final element. And I will not change my way. I will not swerve off the path. These are great people. You know, I mean, these are mountains and pillars of spirituality. These are the figures of history, the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who we look to for their steadfastness. We look up to them and we emulate them and we love them and we are committed to them and submit to them because of that steadfastness in the way of Allah. Ma baddalu tabdila. They don't swerve. They're committed to their principles. They are people of principles. They don't shift here and there depending on the circumstance and the situation they're in. This is what makes them worthy of emulation, as the Quran tells us. And then the verse after that, or rather before that, tells us a little bit about who these people are. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. We have to put it into the context here in Al Imran. The verses in Al Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That in the Messenger of Allah is the best example. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُ اللَّهَ وَيَوْمَ الْآخِرَةِ. For the one who desires Allah and the next day. This is very important because these are the attributes of those who don't change their way, of those who are firm, of those who don't run away from the principles, walk away from the principles, renege on their contracts with God. Because for them, their best and most important role model is Rasulullah. And Rasulullah, of course, has told us that his Ahlul Bayt are his successors. And that submission to him is no different than the submission to Amir al-Mu'mineen, to Imam al-Hasan, to Imam al-Hussein, to Imam Zain al-Abidin, to the 12th Imam. May Allah hasten his reappearance. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Thus, piggybacking on what was mentioned in the previous talk, those individuals, those scholars that guide us best towards that way, towards that path, towards that way of life, towards that tariq and sabil, shouldn't they be respected? Shouldn't they be given a status above everybody else? Shouldn't they be A'zam, greatest, and above? Not that they would seek that out. Not that our ulama would seek that position. No. But it's our duty to recognize who's who in the society. We are not created all as social equals. That is the truth. People of the highest knowledge and piety, and who best remind us of these verses, or best remind us of those who embody these verses, deserve by the right of Allah Himself, by the kalam of Allah Himself, by the kalam of Rasulullah Himself, by the kalam of the rest of the ma'asumeen themselves. They are not only deserved, they are entitled to be treated like kings. Not in the material sense I'm speaking about, living in palaces. Of course, our ulama don't live in that way. But we don't think in these ways. Many of us don't think in these terms. We don't think with this philosophy. Because it's not a Quranic way of life. It's not. It's not Quran and Rasul centered. It's something else. The life of a scholar, what is it? It brings tears to my eyes to think about it. The sacrifices that they give in the way of God. Leave aside the Ahlul Bayt Salam. I don't mean leave aside, but I mean in the sense of that is so high, that is so great, that is so Allahu Akbar. I don't mean leave aside in the sense of neglect. I mean just in terms of focus at the moment. Of course, Imam Ali is the misdaq of all of this. Nobody can, I mean, Rasul al-Khuda and Amir al-Mu'mineen. No doubt, as I have said. But how would we know of these things if the ulama did not teach it to us? We know it. We have preserved the traditions of Ahlul Bayt. We have preserved the tafsir of the Quran. We have preserved the Sharia. We have preserved this kalam. We have preserved its understanding. Have we? We have done it. Allah has chosen certain people for this task. And we would dare to put them at the same level as some secular people or we would dare compare them to engineers and doctors? This is a dhulm. We would dare compare them to some other profession or some other job, whether it treats the body or something else. I'm not demeaning any other jobs. May Allah grant us all tawfiq to do service to society. But no, humans are not all the same. Those who know are not equal to those who don't know, as we read in the Quran. Those of wisdom are not equal to those who don't have that wisdom. That hikmat is what? Ultimately, the peak of that hikmat and wisdom is what? In being able to tell me I have cancer and put me on a regimen of radiation and chemo and whatever drugs of different types to kill the bad cells in my body. Will that save me from the fire of hell? Will that bring me closer to my Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen? Will that make me love Rasulullah more? Will that improve my night prayer? Will that facilitate my soul to travel to the next world with the right belief and the right actions? I'm not demeaning that. It is important. Social welfare, bodily welfare is important. Mu'mineen, let's not make comparisons that are not valid. And if they are, they're ala asas al-jahal, on the foundation of jahal and ignorance. And often I hear these comparisons. And I remember a friend of mine. It's a beautiful story, He was a prominent member of our community, and I loved him very much. He passed away not long ago. May Allah bless his soul. And he once told me, he once came up to me, and he was once having a conversation with a physician. And again, nothing against physicians. Some of my best friends are physicians, doctors, or pediatricians, all kinds. Nothing, it's just he happened to have a conversation with a physician. It could have been with someone else, okay? He had a conversation with a physician. And he goes up to the physician and he tells the physician, "How much do you make?" That's kind of private, brother. That's a private question. Let me guess, 250? You're senior. You must have investments in the clinics and all that, or whatever you're doing. By now, you must have figured out your trade. 250, $250,000, at least you must be pulling in by now. About that. Maybe a little less, let's say. You're earning well. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. And there's nothing wrong with that. May Allah bless you and give you more tawfiqat in your work. But you want to pay the alim 50,000. 60, 70, let's say, 80, let's say. and you want him to drive, or her to drive, the beat-up Toyota Tercel, rust bucket, used, that he could even barely afford to buy, while you're driving around in the 200K Range Rover. Somehow, because you give someone radiation, and you figure out the bad cells from the good cells in their body, and he guides you and your children towards the Akhirat. What would the Quran teach us? Now, if he wants to give away that salary, half of it, 3/4 of it to charity, that's up to him. I'm not saying that ulama should get paid this much. My point is a matter of principle. What would Allah tell us in the Quran? What would Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen tell us? Honestly, let's be serious. Let's be straight here, brothers. Yet, this is the thinking in the world in which we live. Fortunately or unfortunately, perhaps unfortunately. Because at the end of the day, it is this group of people that guide us to know who these great men and women are in history. To remember those who all they wanted was the recognition of Allah. Yarjullah. You know how hard that is? I know we use these words of Quran a lot, but I want you to actually think about how difficult, how profound this is. That they follow the Rasul in everything that he does because he is uswatun hasana for them. And they do it because for Allah. For the one who hopes for thawab from Allah and the final day. And if somebody can guide me or you to that path, what an amazing feat that is. Or maybe it's just me because that's the way we see it. But I think anyone who looks at the Quran would understand this. And we read that for these people, these are the people of these verses from Al Imran, Surah Al Imran, around verse 23, 24, around that series of verses. Imam al-Baqir describes these kinds of people in a beautiful hadith. He says that, let this world be for you like an abode that you've taken while you're on transit. Yani irtahala an. The person is just transiting through. Or let it be like wealth that you found in your sleep. Kamalun. Wajadtuhu fi manamik. Like money that you found while you were sleeping, and when you wake up, it's gone. That the nature of this world is like this. It's like a dream. You're sleeping, and when you die, you wake up, and you're in reality. Now this moment that we have in this world, this short moment that we have, because it's nothing compared to the next world. Nothing. I mean, it's these 60, 70, 80 years, even if we live that long, compared to infinity. Right? And it is only in these years that the rest of infinity will be determined. Think of it. Put it in perspective here. This is what Imam is trying to tell us. Put it in perspective. It is in the midst of these years of free will that we have. 50, 60, 70 years, let's say. 40 years. Who knows? 20 years. 38 years. That the rest of infinity, our life in infinity will be determined. And if somebody can guide us right and give us what they can to guide us along that path. Whether they're entertaining or not is immaterial here. Right? Entertainment it's not about entertainment. If we think about infinity and the seriousness of what this issue is, we may not come looking for entertainment. As the Prophet says, if you knew what I knew, you would laugh very little and cry very much. Do we take it seriously? Do we take it seriously? That's the question. Are we looking for depth and ilm and marifat? Something that will propel us into the next world? Or are we looking perhaps for something else? These people in the Quran are these great shuhada, awliya. Ashab of Imam al-Hussein, will come to them in a moment. This is where we're going, to the Ashab of Abu Abdullah. Who are they? Again, these are in the same verse, the series of verses in Al Imran. لَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ. That when the mu'minun saw the Ahzab with Rasulullah, the confederate forces that came together against Rasulullah and the mu'mineen, قَالُوا هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولَهُ. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That when they saw they're outnumbered, and they got a lot of people against them, they said, Allah and His Rasul have already promised us this. هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. There was no doubt in them. مُوقِنِينَ, people of certainty. They were certain. مَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. There's no change in their way. They're not playing games with the deen. Their deen ain't a game for them. It's not a game. وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And Allah and His Messenger are true and true. They are true. Brothers, I want you to remember these ayat from Al Imran. Sisters, please. It's very important. Let it be a part of your life. These are very, very important ayat. All the ayat are important. These are very important because it's describing the sifat of the ashab of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The attributes of the ashab. وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And Allah and His Messenger are truthful. No doubt again, Ma. No doubt. No swerving. No changing. وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. Allahu Akbar. And they only increased, intensified in two things. So they're against the wall, they're in trouble, so to speak, physical trouble, they're outnumbered, they're staring down the barrel of death. They've already said, this is what Allah and His Messenger have promised us. They've already said, Allah and His Messenger are truthful. صَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. And they didn't increase in what? Fear? Did they become more scared? Scared of losing their loved ones, scared of losing their wealth, scared of A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever it is? No. They only intensified, increased, became stronger in their iman, in their conviction in Allah, and their submission to Allah and His Messenger. Do we understand this, mu'mineen? Do we really understand what Allah is telling us here? Because we talk a lot, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we do a lot of dhikr of Imam al-Hussein and Ashab al-Hussein, Ashab Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yes, no doubt. But who were these people? What was their maqam? And if somebody can guide me to that, can teach me about that, can give me ta'aleem about that, can intensify that love in my heart, that love that will carry me on the ship of salvation towards paradise, towards infinity. Is she or he to be treated, I don't mean physically, but in other ways, leave aside like a doctor, like a gas station attendant? In terms of their living? Seriously. Mu'mineen, mu'minat. We have to think about, think about the value here. The value. How will we face Allah and His Messenger? Ulama have their mas'uliyat. No doubt they have great responsibilities. And they have to fulfill them. They have to be paragons of piety. They have to be paragons of justice. They have to protect the community from evil. Yes, they sure do. They have to use the member for guidance, not for fitna. Yes. Meaning not to take people away from marja'iyat, as we mentioned in the previous lecture. Away from hawza ilmiya, as Aga has advised. The mu'mineen, the khutaba and the speakers on the member of Rasulullah. Yes. Yes. But what is the mas'uliyat and the responsibilities of the mustami'een, of the listeners? Do we honor our great scholars? And if we do, may Allah give you more tawfiq to continue doing that. I'm not saying people are not. I'm just saying if you're already on that path, may Allah ask you, may you make dua to Allah for tawfiq to increase in that way. So what is the reward now of these people who we are describing in Surah Al-Imran? لِيَجْزِيَ اللَّهُ الصَّادِقِينَ بِصِدْقِهِمْ. Allahu Akbar. So that Allah, all of this is so that Allah will reward. لِيَجْزِيَ اللَّهُ الصَّادِقِينَ بِصِدْقِهِمْ. That Allah will reward the truthful people because of their truthfulness. Not that because they were truthful in their commitment to La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. They were truthful in their commitment to this. بصدقهم ويعذب المنافقين إن شاء or يتوب عليهم, and God will punish rather the hypocrites, or He will, as He wishes, or He will accept their repentance. إن الله كان غفور رحيم, and Allah is most forgiving and merciful. But the point is, brothers and sisters, that yes, this is a very high maqam. This is a very high maqam. Yes. But the least we could do is be in love with those who are in this maqam, which is of course Ahlul Bayt first and foremost, and the Shuhada after that. And perhaps if we can, even be in love with those that guide us towards the Shuhada and the Masumin, the Ahlul Bayt, who are also of course Shuhada, but the Ahlul Bayt, nothing can come before them. Even if we can't reach that level, Allah will reward us for our love and commitment and tears for those who have reached that maqam. And we read about them, right? where Ahlul Bayt have said, نَحَنُّ أَمَانُ لِأَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ, or rather, نُجُوم أَمَانُ لِأَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ, that the stars are a protection for the people of the, of the skies. It's very interesting. Could be, I think, if I'm not correct, planes, even pilots can be guided by the stars, or something like that. It can guide people who are doing things in the sky, floating around in there, whether they're being hot air balloons or in other kind of crafts. It's a guide for them. وَأَهْلُ بَيْتِ أَمَانُ لِأَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ. And my Ahlul Bayt, as the Prophet says, are a protection for the people of this earth. فَازَ مَنْ تَمَسَّكَ بِهِمْ, or بِكُمْ. Successful is the one who holds on to you. وَأَمِنَ مَنْ لَجَأَ إِلَيْكُمْ. And secure and at peace, secure and comfortable is the one who seeks refuge in you, in the Ahlul Bayt. That ignorant was he before he became learned because of you. Poor was he or she before he became rich because of you. Sick was he or she before he became healed because of you. Destined towards an uncertain akhirah was he or she before he became Jannati because of you. Lowly was he or she until he or she became high and Ali because of you. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And this is where we read لما اشتد الأمر بالحسين, that when the affair became very difficult around Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, what happened? This hadith is very powerful. The companions started looking at him and those who were with him, and they began noticing certain things. That for some people, when they died, what happened to them? Their color changed. They began emptying their bowels, began crying. Horrible, trembling with ra'ab, with fear. Yet when it came to Imam al-Hussein and his companions, they noticed something else. What did they notice? The skin was shimmering with light, as opposed to turning pale and nasty and just, that dead color, right? Color of death. Instead of shaking and convulsing on the ground, emptying out their body, they were straight. وَتَسْكُنُ نُفُوسُهُمْ. And their souls were just, it's like they were just looking at something so beautiful. They just passed away smiling. These are the people. These are the people we just described from the Quran. These ayat karima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the people. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُ اللَّهَ وَيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ. They only wanted Allah in the next day. The souls were at rest. Some of them looked at Hussein and they said, لَا يُبَالِ بِالْمَوْتِ. What's up? He's not worried about what's going to happen, man. People are getting their heads cut off, they're getting stabbed, they're getting hurt bad. لَا يُبَالِ بِالْمَوْتِ. He's not concerned. Abu Abdullah now gives a wasiyat, advice to them, nasiha and wasiyat to them. He says, قَالَ لَهُمْ الْحُسَيْنِ صَبْرًا بَنِيَ الْكِرَامِ. He says, have patience, my honorable brethren. فَمَا الْمَوْتِ لَقَنْطَرَةٌ. For death is but a bridge that you will cross over. عَنِ الْبُؤْسِ وَالْضَرَّاءِ. From suffering and pain and difficulty. إِلَى الْجِنَانِ الْوَاسِعَةِ وَالنَّعِيمَ الدَّائِمَةِ. to the vast gardens and the infinite and perpetual blessings. You're crossing the bridge. Think of it like a crossing. What is there to be petrified about? أيكم يكره أن ينتقل من سجن إلى قصر? That which of you would dislike to go from a prison to a castle? Which of you would hate that, would dislike that? What would be wrong with you? He says, because my father has narrated, who has narrated from Rasulullah. What has he narrated? That the dunya is sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. And yes, there can be some dynamism in that and discussions. Sure, absolutely. But there's a time and a place for that, and a context for that. I don't think the time and place and context for that is necessarily among brothers and sisters who don't have a complete grasp of these issues. I mean, nothing else works that way. I mean, sciences don't work that way, and I don't like comparing the sciences to this. I mean, the material sciences. But it doesn't work that way. I mean, are we going to sit here now and discuss, well, yeah, maybe climate change. I don't know about it. Yeah, Trump said the fires in California caused by arson. Yeah, okay. It's a half-truth, isn't it? Because, yes, arson or a campfire may have been a part of it, but why are they spreading so fast? Why are they burning so hot? Why are they continuing in the way that they're continuing? Now, only a scientist, a real scientist would start being able to go through the data, understand that, the distinction between A and B, right? Proposition A and Proposition B. Because he's got the facts, the data, or she has the facts and the data in front of her. They've understood, they've spent their life in studying these sciences and these, and specializing in forest fires, right? Now, it would be very unfair for me to just take Trump's statement, which is perhaps a half-truth if at that, and come on the pulpit and say, guys, this is it. And then I walk off the pulpit, drink my chai, and go home. I've done a disservice to my community and my Jamaat. I've done a disservice to you, and you know why what Aga says? He says something so beautiful, which I just recalled now. Aga says that the mu'mineen who listen, the Azadar of Imam Hussein are a people of intelligence, and their intelligence should be respected. Don't come up on this member and play games. It's a place for facts. And giving half-truths and half-facts. Or better yet, don't even get into these very, this web of scientific discussions on certain issues that maybe that's not the place for it. Maybe we don't even have the time to go through each and every little detail in that regard. It's not to say that the listener is not able to handle it, but that's maybe not the place and the time and the context for that discussion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
It's in these nights, brothers, that we remember and we recall the statements of Ahlul Bayt, the narrations that are reported in the books of our ulama al-kiram. Sahib al-Zaman in the ziyarah known as Ziyarat al-Nahiya describes the final moments in the life of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I will describe the words to you, and I'd like you to contemplate over what Sahib al-Zaman is saying. He says, وَقَدْ شُغِلْتَ بِنَفْسِكَ عَنْ وُلْدِكَ وَأَهَالِيكَ. That he's addressing his grandfather Imam al-Hussein, And he's saying to his grandfather that you became very occupied. You became occupied and concerned yourself with your family, with your children and your family. Why? What was about to happen to his children that he had to be concerned about? What was about to happen to his women that he had to be concerned? Were they really about to do the unthinkable? Because we read in the ziyarah known as Ziyarah Nahiya, narrated by Ibn Mashhadi in his Mazar al-Kabir, that the Imam began glancing tarfan khafiyya, like hidden glances towards his family, as the sweat of death appeared on his face. Can you imagine what Imam al-Hussein was going through? I just want you to just take a breath. Maybe close your eyes and imagine Imam alayhi salam, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, laying on the ground with his eyes twitching towards his daughters. His daughter and his children and his women. Tarfun khafiyya, Sahib Zaman says, like he was peeking towards them, meaning that he was most likely disabled at this point, because it wasn't like he could get back on his horse and ride back to them to help them. They tell us, from what we can discern from this riwayah, is that this was the most heartbreaking moment in the life of Imam al-Hussein, perhaps one of them. During the final moments of his life, he knew what they were about to do. Because Tabari reports from Abu Mikhnaf and others that Shimr had 10 men block off Hussein, while the others began looting his family. So the looting of his women and his children began before he even died, according to some traditions. And there is reason to believe that it began perhaps just before they killed Imam Hussein, because they blocked him off. He was not. Do you think Imam would have returned to his family to protect them? If Imam could have, would have he returned to stop them from tearing the earrings out of his sister Kulthum? But he couldn't, because he was already covered in arrows. He was already covered in wounds from head to toe. And he pleaded with them not to attack his women. We know that he pleaded with them. So what did they do to his women? We read in multiple reports, multiple books, that when they entered the tent of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Fatima bint al-Hussein narrates to us, she says, Ana jari'atun saghira, that I was a little girl at the time, I was a young girl at the time. And I had on 2 golden anklets. This is narrated by Shaykh Tusi and others. I had on 2 golden anklets. And when they came into the tent, now brothers, I want you to pause again. Anklets are around the ankle. Normally you would be wearing an abaya covering those, yes or no? Normally our girls would be wearing a skirt covering those, yes or no? So what would a man have to do, as she says, that when he came in, he broke them off of my feet? That when he entered the tent, he broke the anklets from my feet. If you have a wife or a daughter or a sister, what would you do if a man came into your home, broke open your door, and trying to break the jewelry from the ankles of your daughter? What ghirat you would have at that moment in time. You would give your own life to prevent it. Yet the madlumiyat of Imam al-Hussein, The ghurbat of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was what here? Was that he had to lay on the ground because of his wounds, because he could not return to his family to stop this atrocity from occurring. That he laid there, as Sahib al-Zaman says, in a state of worry, in a state of profound occupation about what was about to happen or happening to his daughters. And then, as the man is doing this to her, he begins to cry. Can you imagine? Fatima bint al-Hussein turns to him and tells him, "Why are you crying? Yani limada tabki? What are you crying for?" He says, "I am plundering the daughters of Rasulullah." So she turns to him and you know what she says? "So don't do it. Don't do it for God, by God, don't do it." He says, "If I don't do it, who's gonna do it?" This is how sick these people were, brothers. And then the riwayah states that they began even plundering the shawls, the malahif of the Ahlul Bayt. That when they were done with the anklets, they began taking the shawls from the Ahlul Bayt. Malahif an duhuri. Can you imagine the malahif? What would we do if our wife was there? And these are the daughters of Rasulullah and Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. Ala la'natullahi ala qawm al-zalimeen. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویوں ذرا قید خانے میں بندنے کا، قید خانے میں بندنے کا، سر اٹھاؤ تو ذرا کچھ بتاؤ تو گھر کا لٹا، سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویوں ذرا قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، میں لائی ہوں بچوں کے لیے، کھانا لائی ہوں آپ کے لیے، میوے لائی ہوں بچوں کے لیے، کھانا لائی ہوں آپ کے لیے، کھاؤ اس میں سے آپ تھوڑا سا، سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویوں ذرا قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، سر اٹھاؤ تو وارثوں کے سر کس جگہ کٹے، کون سی خطا پہ آپ ہیں لٹے، وارثوں کے سر کس جگہ کٹے، کون سی خطا پہ آپ ہیں لٹے، حال بچوں کا خیر کیوں ہوا، سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویوں ذرا قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، قید خانے میں ہندنے کا، سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویوں، لاؤ کی کھول دو رسن، بدلو بچوں کے اجلے پیرہن، سر چھپانے کو لائی ہوں ردا، سر اٹھاؤ ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو پھر سکینہ کو گودی میں لیا پیار کر کے اور اس سے یہ کہا پھر سکینہ کو گود میں لیا پیار کر کے اور اس سے یہ کہا قید کس لیے آپ کو کیا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں نے کہا قید خانے میں نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو ہند نے کہا پھر سکینہ سے کچھ خبر نہیں کیا کہوں تجھے ہند نے کہا پھر سکینہ سے کچھ خبر نہیں کیا کہوں تجھے ہند نے کہا کچھ تو دو پتا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا قید خانے میں ہند نے کہا سر اٹھاؤ تو بیویو ذرا
خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے لے جاؤ میرا عہد میں لے جاؤ میرا عہد میں لے جاؤ میرا عہد میں یہی غم خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے نشان حضرت عباس کی ضیا نشان حضرت عباس کی ضیا نشان حضرت عباس کی ضیا سارے جہاں پہ چھائے سارے جہاں پہ چھائے سارے جہاں پہ چھائے یہ پرچم خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے دل سے غم حسین نہ ہو کم خدا کرے او بے علی ہو دل میں زباں پر ہو یا حسین او بے علی ہو دل میں زباں پر ہو یا حسین علی ہو دل میں زباں پر ہو یا حسین جب بات نزع نکلے جب بات نزع نکلے جب بات نزع نکلے میرا دم ڈر ڈر کے کہہ رہے تھے آپس میں سب لڑی
ڈر ڈر کے کہہ رہے تھے یہ آپس میں سب لڑی آباد ہونا نہر پہ
آباد ہونا نہر پہ
آباد ہونا نہر پہ بر ہم خدا کرے
دل سے ہمیں حسین نہ ہو غم خدا کرے دل سے ہمیں حسین نہ ہو غم خدا کرے
اکبر نے شہ کے سامنے توڑا تھا جیسے دم
اکبر نے شہ کے سامنے توڑا تھا جیسے جو
اکبر نے شہ کے سامنے توڑا تھا جیسے دم کوئی بدر نہ دیکھے
کوئی بدر نہ دیکھے
کوئی بدر نہ دیکھے یہ آدم خدا کرے
دل سے ہمیں حسین نہ ہو غم خدا کرے دل سے ہمیں حسین نہ ہو غم خدا کرے
خیمے میں کر رہی تھی سکینہ یہی دعا
خیمے میں کر رہی تھی سکینہ یہی دعا